Thank you very much. And can I just also add, on the Jean Monnet and the leadership thing, I wanted to use that also as an opportunity to pick up on something that Mario Monti said earlier. You talk in the report about diversity being a strength, or it should be a strength, and this is not a tenuous link, because I think they are linked, really. When you talked about avoiding a repugnant cacophony, there's a piece in the Financial Times this morning about the vision, quoting both of you gentlemen, which focuses very much on this question of a single unified voice in economic fora and so on. But without the leadership, without that sense, without getting away from the cacophony, is there really any hope of us speaking with a single voice? Can I know you wanted to add your own points, but I just wanted to throw that into the mix as well. Minister, I think you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I wanted to add something from the previous questions regarding education. India and China are providing with 4 million graduates per year, and forecasts announce that this will be even increasing. So it's obvious that Europe cannot compete in quantity, but we can compete in quality, and we need a policy to attract talent from these countries and other countries into Europe. And of course, I think that private-public partnership in R&D is a very good idea, and we have done a few of these with great success in France and in Spain also. And regarding the education level, I think that the Bologna process is a good step. Maybe it's too early to see how it's moving, but I think it's a good step to try to get the quality of European universities back in time. And regarding the single voice of Europe in economic matters, I prefer to leave the word on Mario Monti.
Thank you.
You have the poison chalice, Mr. Monti.
Because we want to have a single voice, which is Mario Monti.
Well, that, of course, as we all know, largely depends on the treaties and on institutions. There are basically 3 areas so far where Europe speaks externally with a single voice. 2 are there since the 50s, trade policy and competition policy, since the Treaty of Rome. The 3rd, very powerful and very well used single voice, is of course the monetary policy voice, since more recently. Now, the Lisbon Treaty goes some way towards allowing something similar in the pure foreign policy arena. And I believe that there are, even within the Lisbon Treaty, because I don't think there will be much appetite for a new treaty negotiation in the short term, or with add-ons about referenda and those niceties that maybe one day we will miss, but not for the time being. But even within the Lisbon Treaty, I believe that Europe can achieve something more, for example, in terms of the seats at the IMF and things like that. And again, in those areas where Europe does speak with a single voice, the rest of the world, starting from the US, treats us as peers. Sometimes we are more forceful than they are, and we cannot complain if we are not taken seriously when we project the cacophony on the global scene.
Thank you very much. I know there were lots of hands raised before, so I'm going to take another round and then come back to the panel.
My name is John Wiles. I have a number of affiliations. The most recent and one I'm much enjoying is the European Policy Centre. I'd like to congratulate the ERT on a very good and very interesting report. It contains a lot of stuff we're familiar with, but which needs repeating. But I just wonder whether it isn't rather much more yes we should rather than yes we can, in the sense that it doesn't really pay much attention to the current situation in which we find ourselves, and in particular the sort of consensus economic forecasts that predict very low, by which I mean below 2% growth for the next 5 to 10 years. Is this vision really attainable in a situation of very low growth? I was very interested in your inclusive definition of sustainability, which includes pensions, social policies, raw materials, and God knows what else. What are the 5 priority recommendations you would make for the next 5 years to policymakers?
Okay. Anybody else want to come back in this one? Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Manfred Bergmann from the European Commission, DG Enterprise, also in charge of the development of industrial policy. And I have three small questions. We are just talking about your vision for a competitive Europe, which is, after all, a market economy. And how would you say, what is the division of labor between policy on the one side and the market actors on the other side? Is it 10% policy and 90% market? Is it 80% policy you have to deliver for your vision, or is it 20%? And do you have a plan B in case policy doesn't deliver? For example, you talked about a climate agreement by the end of this year. What happened if it is not happening? To Professor Monti, I have a question with respect to the internal market. You talked about the relaunch of the internal market exercise and integration fatigue. For me, this sounds a little bit like a kind of marketing exercise. Is it more than a marketing exercise, or more of the same for other sectors, such as the service sector? Or is it also a different approach? And to the Minister of Industry, I have the question, what is there in for industrial policy? There is a discussion of a paradigm shift that we should become perhaps more interventionist, that we should go for European champions. Is this a view you are sharing?
Okay. Quite a lot of questions there, a lot to deal with. There's one over there.
I'm Alexa Joyce from European SchoolNet. We're a network of 31 ministries of education. And of course, representing education, we are extremely supportive of ERT's vision involving education and making that a key part of the strategy. I have two questions. One is there have been some very strong movements towards a partnership between education and business, and over the next few years, how can we take this forward and turn it into a long-term sustainable partnership? And my second question is a little bit on ICT infrastructure. There's some very interesting recommendations on, for instance, liberalization of digital content markets and so on, which would certainly help schools as we start to move towards a digital textbooks and so on. But how do we make sure that schools themselves also have a really sustainable ICT infrastructure in place in the school, so that young people are exposed to technology while they're studying and have a positive view of it rather than a skeptical one?
My name is Ben Terman. I'm from the Teacher Research. I would like to address Mr. Minister on the following. I really enjoyed and support your statement. We need the investment in education. We need the smart brains for the future. Also, we have to attract the smart brains from abroad. As an example, the US, in California, 52% of the entrepreneurs that set up in the high-tech hubs, the new enterprises, are immigrants. Not few of them, by the way, Europeans. We will need that also in Europe. And I was wondering whether the Southern European states have a vision for the 2020, where say we will compete for become the California
I really must
of 2020.
ask you to. Thank you. One very last, and I insist, brief, so the panel has a chance to respond.
Could you possibly say a bit more on the external dimension of the EU policy? Which challenges do you see there, notably in terms of competitiveness? Thank you.
I would like you, let's go back to what the ERT said it wanted to do, to achieve a competitive Europe in 2025 and ensure that Europe remains an attractive place to live and work, and you very much put the emphasis on that. For you, what would be, and this is where I'm being meaner than John, your top priority, if you had to pick one thing that needed to be done in 2010, i.e. in terms of the quick wins, what would your one thing be? And second, over the 5-year term of the new European Commission and new European Parliament. So by all means give your 5, but I'd like you at the end of them just to pick one of them. And we have really a couple of minutes each to respond to those things in the audience. As I'm sure your top priority is probably something you've mentioned already, but really just to pick, to avoid the Christmas tree effect we talked about earlier, your one priority. So who would like to kick off on both the questions from the audience and that one? No one, I suspect. Mr. Monti.
Yes, just to say that I don't agree with the exercise. To have a fairly high number of priorities set out in coherence is not a Christmas tree. But if I had nevertheless to play by the game,